Thank you so much for coming out. We have a great panel assembled for you, and we're going to have a discussion around attracting the best. Like, how do we actually do a better job of getting more diverse candidates into law firms, and then how do we keep them there? We will have room at the end for questions and answers, and we'll make sure that we preserve that space for you. Just please save your questions. Let me introduce our panel. I have at my immediate left Caren Stacy, founder and CEO of Diversity Lab and the OnRamp Fellowship. Next to her, I have Deborah Broyles, partner and director of global diversity and inclusion at Reed Smith. Finally, Anjan Choudhury is a partner in the Los Angeles office of Munger, Olson, Olson. So with that, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to talk a little bit about yourselves and what brings you here.
I'll talk about myself first. So I am the co-chair of MTO's Fellows Program, which is a fairly new initiative where we bring together 35 students who are looking to go to law school from disadvantaged and diverse backgrounds. And that's actually been a big new effort to build a sort of cohort community pipeline program. Very different than a lot of the initiatives that exist now where you sort of find the one or two diverse people who have perfect grades, who are perfect in every way, and every law firm fights over them. So I think I'm here to talk a little bit about that, and then I'm also the president of the South Asian Bar Association for Southern California. So I've gotten some pretty decent exposure in that to how minority bar associations play into these questions that law firms have about attracting talent.
Thank you.
Again, I'm Deborah Broyles. I'm with Reed Smith. I sat in on the prior panel and I listened to some of the discussion there, and I'm sitting here thinking, I've been out here doing this since 1993 when I came out here as an associate, and very early on in my career got involved with diversity in the legal profession, and I'm candidly a little disheartened, but I guess also pleased that we're still talking about the same stuff. Decades later, we're still talking about the same stuff. So I'm glad we're still talking about it, but it's a little disheartening that we haven't moved along a little farther than we have. So again, I came out as an associate in '93. I've been working in diversity in the legal arena ever since that time on an individual basis in terms of grassroots mentoring of other attorneys once I became partner. And I'm now holding my second sort of director position for diversity in a large firm, and just started that this year with Reed Smith, and looking forward to sharing with you some of the things that we're doing.
Hi, I'm Caren Stacy. I'm the CEO of a company called Diversity Lab, and one of our major projects is called the OnRamp Fellowship, where we help women lawyers who have taken a hiatus from practice come back into the profession. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in just a second. But in terms of my background, I spent the first 20 years inside law firms as the head of talent. So I was in charge of lawyer recruiting, development, diversity, retreats, the life cycle of the lawyer, from the moment we brought them in to the moment we either advanced them or outplaced them, because when I started, those were the only two options. Luckily, we have others now. Not as many as I would like, but we have others. And I spent the first 20 years of my life being as innovative inside law firms as I possibly could have, which, as you know, is not all that innovative. So I'm going to spend the next 20 years, and that's what the Diversity Lab is. It's all experimental. We're trying everything we can to increase diversity and inclusion in the legal profession and the financial services profession. And it's kind of like cooking spaghetti al dente and throwing it up on the wall to see what sticks. Because what we've been doing hasn't worked as well as we hoped. So let's try a bunch of new things. And I'm going to talk about a couple of those.
Sure. So obviously, a lot of skill, a lot of talent and experience here. Let's talk a little bit about kind of where the rubber meets the road. So what programs or techniques have you seen that really seem like they've kind of moved the needle on diversity? And to any of you who want to start.
I would say in the most recent past, I guess starting in, I think it was 2011 or 2012, when the Leadership Council for Legal Diversity started their Fellows Program. I think that has been one of the most impactful programs I've seen since I've been doing this. And for those of you, I assume everyone here knows what that is, but for those of you who don't, it was a collaboration of what is now, I guess, 225, I think, leaders from law firms and major corporations who have put together this organization where they are having meaningful impact on the advancement of diverse attorneys within their organizations. And I think, what's unique about that fellowship program is that it really does start from the top, and it is drilled down. And when you've got managing partners at firms who are partnering with GCs at corporations, we were talking earlier about relationship building, they get the opportunity to build those relationships with their clients or prospective clients, and to do it around this diversity issue is, I think, just phenomenal. And so I can tell you, in my firm alone, we've had a fellow every year. Each organization has a fellow who is a part of the program, and they do everything from experiential, learning opportunities where they go to the corporations, they talk to the executives at the corporations, to having lunches at the law firms. They get one-on-one mentoring with these individuals, and we were one of the founding members, and we've had a diverse candidate in each year, and each year, the year after, that person has made partner, and has started like out of the box with some business, with the skills that are needed to advance. And that program, to me, is just one of the most impactful that we've seen in some time. And to the extent it can be replicated in law firms and corporations,
Right.
I think it would be great.
Right. Sounds like phenomenal success there
Yeah.
for that. Anjan, what have you seen?
Well, so, it was 2 years ago, we sort of took a look around what were the different pipeline initiatives that people were doing in the industry. What you saw commonly, whether it was sponsored by a law school or by a law firm or a partnership with a corporation, is that they were, let's find one or two people, let's try to mentor them, let's try to make an impact on them, and that makes an impact for those one or two people. And then they go into law school, or they're coming out of law school, and everybody fights over those one or two people. And then, as you've seen this morning, there's so much talk about the isolation that people feel. So we said, let's try to do something very different. Let's stop talking about a pipeline to MTO. Let's talk about a pipeline project. So we said, we're a big firm, but we're not massive. We're about 200 attorneys. We said, we're going to get together 35 people. And we're going to have them meet every week that are all going to law school. And we had tremendous applicants. I mean, the stories of these folks are amazing. They're all from, like I told you, diverse, disadvantaged backgrounds. Almost every one of them will be the first in their family to ever go to law school. Almost everyone is the first to ever go to college. And we have them meet once a month at our office together. And we bring in people like, for example, this weekend is our next workshop. And we have folks coming in from Fox Entertainment Group, from Oak Tree, from Edison, who are all going to talk about what it's like to be an in-house counsel. These are before you go to law school. So all of a sudden, when you go to law school, you aren't the person who's never met a lawyer before, right? And you aren't the person who has never thought about what's a clerkship like. And on the flip side, we're also bringing in people, financial aid officers from 4 different area law schools, talk with them about navigating the financial aid process. Here's the trick. We also do LSAT prep, but they do it together. We have a test prep partner, and it's customized so that the whole experience, which sounds great in its benefits, is really about building a cohort or community. And organically, of course, they have a Facebook group now that they started. And when these folks go to law school, whether they go together or they go to different law schools, they're going to have a community. And then next year, we've already told them, we expect you to be the mentors to our next fellows. And in some ways, it comes out of things like the LTLD model, this idea that we can build a community of attorneys from diverse backgrounds, and they can build together. And we've already seen, we've had so many people come in, because each month we do this, we have like people from nonprofits want to come in, and they come and meet the fellows, And they're so excited. We did a great session with the general counsel from Universal Music Group. Came in after this, he's like, I can't believe you guys are doing this kind of thing. This is the kind of thing that we should be doing, is building these communities. And so we're really hoping, we're launching it. We've had our first group that we're working through. We're now looking at our second group, in the selection process. We're hoping that other folks will absolutely take the idea and run with it, because, we can only do one of these, and we'd love for other people too.
Right.
So this is that's our program. Jury's still out on whether it works, but we're trying.
Well, it sounds phenomenal. And it certainly addresses one of the primary causes of dissatisfaction for minority associates, right? Which is just isolation.
Yeah.
And not feeling they have a peer group that they can go to. And this kind of gives them potentially a peer group that's spread across.
Yeah, and I tell every speaker who meets them, they're no longer shy. And I think that's a big thing, is that when you then step into a law firm or a law school environment and you're the only person who looks like you tend to become even more shy than you are before. But these folks have been used to now meeting successful lawyers, meeting and seeing people who also look like them. And so when they're going into law school, they become less and less shy, which I think is going to mean long-term success.
Right, right.
The other thing I like about that so much is all the research that I've ever done. When I ask lawyers, you're a great mentor. Everyone says you're a great mentor. Why are you a great mentor? Did somebody give you training? And of course, the answer is always no. I didn't get training. I didn't sit in a classroom. Someone did this for me. And that's what I like, the community building piece of that, because now you have 35 people who are going to go into the marketplace to their fellow students and others and be that person to them, because you've taught them how to do it as well. That's phenomenal.
Right, fantastic. And Caren, you want to tell us a little bit more about Diversity Lab and the OnRamp Fellowship?
Yeah. So in the first 20 years of my career inside law firms, I've hired 3,000 lawyers. And I'll admit something to you. I love lawyers. I sleep with one every night. I'm married to him. But ever since I graduated college, I was a journalism major in University of Houston. And I lost my co-op because the Post brought the Chronicle, and no one had any need for an additional editorial intern. So one of my friends said, well, you ought to go write for the dean of U of H Law School. He's writing all these UCC treatises, and at that time I didn't even know what UCC was. And so I went as part of my co-op to work at U of H and to write for the dean. And I got to meet these incredible lawyers and how smart they were. And I figured I was getting smarter every day by just interacting with these people. So then I went to what most people on the law school side call the dark side. I went to the law firm. They pay a lot more money, I don't know if you guys know that, than the law schools do. But I went inside Wall, Gotshal & Manges. And at that point, my entire job was to recruit lawyers. And that was it. I was just supposed to get them in the door. But I got them in the door, and I watched them flail about. If they found a great mentor, they did great. If they didn't, they didn't. And that seemed to be the only data I was getting by watching this happen. So fast forward 20 years. There hasn't been a week in my career that I have not gotten a resume from a woman who has a pretty significant gap in her resume. And every time I get that resume and I put it up against other laterals who are coming from great firms that have no gap, and I put that in front of practice group leaders, and this is at all of my firms, and I say, let me just tell you what we have for this position. Let's talk through the pros and cons of these people and decide who we want to invite in. Invariably, the practice group leader, male or female, will say to me, gosh, Caren, I'm sorry. That gap of 10 years, why did she leave? How do we know she's really ready to come back? How do we know she can service our clients appropriately? Things have changed. And of course I want to giggle a little bit because things haven't changed all that much. But okay, technology has changed. E-discovery is a fairly new technology that litigators are utilizing in order to do their practice successfully. Never in one of the 3,000 lawyers did I convince a practice group leader to even interview a woman with a gap in her resume. And I will tell you, up until then, I thought I was pretty persuasive. Clearly not. So when I stepped out of Arnold & Porter, I decided I was going to find out what the formula for success was. So I started a company called Lawyer Metrics with a couple of IO psychologists and data statisticians, and we did that. For 4 years, we moneyballed lawyers. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with Brad Pitt's movie Moneyball. Before that, just so you know, Billy Beane was the real hero in this, then Brad Pitt took over. But the idea was there's got to be data that tells us what makes for success so that I could answer this question, what makes her good? And if I was to compare her, this gap in her resume, with all these other people, how could I prove she's good? So I started the OnRamp Fellowship. And the idea was if we could just, for 1 year, bring these women back into firms and we could show that they add such incredible value to our marketplace, then maybe something more would happen after that year. But they would get a tryout to come back and get their skills up to date, their contacts up to date, and the law firm would get a chance to see them in action. Because if they did, I was pretty sure they would fall in love with them and want to keep them forever and ever and ever. So I convinced 4 law firms, Baker Botts, Hogan, Sidley, and Cooley, to just try it, to take 1 fellow, 1 year, pay them $125, give them benefits. There was a little bit of pushback on the $125 because people said, well, that's not a lot of money. And I want to say, outside of our world, that is a lot of money. But inside our world, I understand that that's less. But here's why it's less. I do not want you to make them bill what you make first year's bill. I do not want you to put them through the same pressure that the first year feels in putting work over training and mentoring. I want them to come in. I want them to work less. I want them to worry less. I don't want them to feel the guilt of trying to balance what they're doing and coming back and easing back into the profession with having to bill 2,000 hours right away. So women have told me, pay me a little less so I know I can work a little less as I'm easing back into the profession. This whole time the thought was they'll come in for a year, we give them a career counselor, because I don't want them underselling themselves after that year. I want their salaries to double and to triple. I just need to get them in the door, and then I know we can make that happen. So all of the law firms agreed to take 1. We started with 9 fellows. So if you do the math, they all took more than 1, luckily, because there was such an amazing pool of candidates. 170 women applied for the first program. And I will tell you, it is a tough program to go through. They have to take 3 hours of online assessments, psychometrics, a writing, a skills, a motivational. Then they go through a structured behavioral interview with us. We do a 5-page scorecard. We give that to the law firms, and the law firms then decide who they want to interview. The law firms, in order to participate, have to go through a cultural study, so we know what it looks like inside that organization, and we can help make good matches. They also have to let us interview 25 of their high-performing lawyers, so I can figure out what they're doing in their organization to be successful and help the women who are coming in replicate that. The 9 fellows, all but 1 got an offer from their firms at the end. We now have 25 law firms participating, as well as Amazon's legal department and Barclays compliance group, so now 27 organizations. And this is only 2 years old. We just started in January of 2014. We now have 31 fellows. There are 31 women with really tremendous gaps in their resumes who have come back, and they are rocking the house. 12 of them have finished the program, 10 have received offers from their firms. And the 2 who didn't, it was because they decided they were retooling and wanting to go into a different practice group. This test told them they were going into the wrong practice group. So they're either gonna redo their fellowship and go into a practice where they think it's a better fit, or quite frankly, I think they may question whether big law and some of these opportunities are the right ones for them, which was the exact reason for that setup. And the neatest thing that happened as a result of this, well, there are a lot of neat things, but one of the neatest things was partners from law firms, you know, the people that everyone says aren't that disruptive and aren't that innovative, kept coming to me and saying, Caren, I have an idea. You know, we did the fellowship. Could we also do this? Could we also do this? There was just so many ideas being flown about that I said, you know what? Why don't we bring this together? So in January of this year, we're going to do something called the inaugural Women in Law Hackathon. And I know that's not a word we use very often here, but it started with coders, and the idea was if you have a really hard software or hardware program, bring some coders together, probably they could figure it out over an intensive 24 or a week long. Well, we have that same issue. We have a really tough problem. We're trying to solve gender parity. Well, why not bring 54 incredibly thoughtful and sharp legal minds together? We're putting them in teams of 6. They'll work together virtually from January to June of this year with 2 team advisors and a Stanford Law student. In June, they will all come to Stanford Law and they will engage in what we're calling a Shark Tank style pitch competition, where they tell 9 high-profile judges what their ideas are. Bloomberg Law, thank you, Casey and others, have donated the prize money, $22,500, $10,000 for first place, $7,500 and $5,000. The teams that win will donate their money to a nonprofit organization who will help further whatever ideas come out of the hackathon. And then we're going to throw the ideas into the universe. We're going to do speed drawings instead of 10-minute talking heads, speed drawings of the winning ideas, throw them into social media. Wall Street Journal and others have already agreed to pick them up. And hopefully, like I said earlier, cook that spaghetti al dente, throw it on the wall, and see if anything sticks. And I think that's the idea for the next 20 years is let's just try something new and see what sticks.
Great, great. Those are terrific ideas. Do want to make a quick pitch for my organization, California Minority Council Program, CMCP. So one of the things that we do is we do a program we call Corporate Connections. And the idea is that we get in-house counsel who do 15-minute kind of speed interviews with particularly minority attorneys. And what we really do is we encourage the law firms that come to really bring your kind of up-and-coming minority associates. Like, even if they never get the business, this is an amazing opportunity for them to see what a pitch looks like, for them to start making that initial contact. We're really focused on relationship building, right? Not just kind of catching the fish, but learning how to actually kind of plant the hook, how to start the relationship going. In addition, our annual conference, which we're just coming off of, which is why I'm partly pumped up still, is it's a great opportunity for more casual networking and opportunities for lawyers just to mix and to, again, kind of develop those relationships. So I want to talk next about, there's so many things we could talk about, but let's talk a little bit about implicit bias. I think at this point, I would expect that most of our organizations have done, or at least started thinking about doing some form of training around implicit bias and awareness. Now, what I'm really interested in is, after we've increased our awareness of these issues, what do we do to actually make changes in legal organizations so that, you know, we actually get better at attracting and at retaining minority talent?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and you've heard mention of this in various panels this morning, this question of implicit bias and the various speakers who come in and they do their presentation. To me, I think the next stage in this is starting to talk about stereotype threat, which is sort of the other side of the research. And, you know, it's one thing to have your presentation, everyone's like, oh, I have implicit bias, okay, I understand that. But the question is sort of, how does that implicit bias then affect other folks? And I think, you know, we've become aware of implicit bias, we become less aware of how does that sort of translate into the way people see themselves in the workplace. So with the fellows, but also broader with the firm, we've already started talking about questions of stereotype threat and coping strategies and those kinds of things. And I think that if you bring more people into that discussion, then they also start to not just see their bias, but they start to see when their bias manifests itself in the workplace, because they're like, oh, I see what's happening here. No perfect solution, but I think that's the next step.
Right. So I'm interested, Deborah, maybe you were going here, like, has this impacted how you do work assignments or your review process for attorneys?
Yeah, it has. So we've been looking at it, and as I said, this is my first year in this position in the firm. And so this year, I've been looking at it sort of from both ends. So we had a consultant come in and work with our diverse associates, mid and senior level associates, and did an implicit bias training, but also worked with them on the skills that they need to, okay, let's be real, this happens. Mm-hmm. What do you do? How do you handle it? How do you deflect this? How do you address this in your evaluations? How do you, when you're doing your self-evaluation, how do you try to flip the script so that either you use the bias in your favor, right. or you know how to subtly sort of address it? And I got to tell you, the associates were blown away by that particular training and really appreciated getting some very specific tools that they can use in how they can address this issue of implicit bias. Because you're right, I mean, we talk about it all the time, we work really hard to get people aware, but then what do you do?
Yeah, right.
And so the flip side of that now is we had our members of our executive committee and senior management present at the conference, and they did sort of a town hall with the associates, and they got to see some of the questions they were asking as a result of the training they had just gone through. And they were like, wow, talk about awareness, right? They understood at that point. And so I've now been talking with them, and frankly, they were asking me for training on the flip side of it. Right. All right? Yes, we understand that the bias is out there. What do we do? How do we address this? And so we're going to have the same consultant come in and work with them from the management side in Q1 of 2016 to start to see, in terms of managing the firm, how do we address this? It's got to come from the top down. It really has to. The other thing that we've been doing is, I sit on the talent committee for the firm. And so when we go through associate evaluations, I make a point of knowing what's going on with our diverse associates so that I'm interjected into that process and can, try to keep an eye out as best as you can with respect to seeing if there's implicit bias. And then making sure you're working with, your HR people, with, all the folks who are involved in that process, not only to make them aware, but to, really work with them on, okay, how does this play out? And, working through strategies that way. Right. But it really, it's interesting to me. We're a global firm, we're a huge firm, and it absolutely takes that sort of one or two people in there really trying to make consistent change throughout the organization for that to work. Right.
Right. Yeah, it's an amazing theme, I think, in what all you've said. It seems like the real way forward is this combination, right, of kind of top-down and really making a communal effort out of it, but at the same time emphasizing that personal touch and involvement with the lives of diverse attorneys. I want to make sure we honor our commitment to leave time for questions from the audience. So are any questions from you? Yes.
On the Munger school, if I understand the program correctly, there is no obligation for anyone to be an associate at your firm or that kind of thing. It's
That's right.
benevolent, if you will. And of course, you hope that certain people will come back, etc. So that is.
Yeah, I mean, look, we want great, talented attorneys. So if down the road people come back, then that would be a great benefit. But, what we really see as the big benefit to our firm is that it really has created an awareness, both in our firm and sort of in our relationships with our clients, that this is part of who we are. This is part of our fabric. It's, I really, I said once that I think diversity has gone from this question of like, are you diverse or are you diverse, to being more of like a group photo. It's become more of like this sort of social question. And so for us, we want to be part of that conversation, right? And when we build this community of attorneys and, getting back to sort of recruiting and attracting talent, the fact that we do this program, I think it's meaningful. I took our summer associates in and I said, look, I've got this program we've launched. What are your ideas? What can we do? And I think that says something to your young attorneys, to your summer associates, to your people that you're recruiting, that you have a program, whether or not any of our fellows end up being at MTO at some point in their career. It says something that we care enough about that conversation. So I think that's where we get there.
Yeah, that was the articulation that I was interested in. Where was it coming? Did it come from the love of the LA community, or? But I get it. I get it. Thank you. That's a great answer.
Thank you. Great question. Any other questions?
I would just add on there, and that is such a great program that you're doing. LCLD that I mentioned earlier, they also have a scholars program for law students. So they have one-on-one mentoring with first-year law students, and then they have group mentoring with all law students. And they partner with law firms and corporations, again, to reach out to law students that way. So unfortunately, we don't all have programs like this, but there are opportunities to do that through LCLD as well. And then, it's the same thing. There's not a particular commitment that individual comes to your organization, but just a way to do some outreach to law students.
And I would say if your firm is not part of this LCL, I mean, I told you, we looked at all the programs that were out there, and this, I've worked with our 1L, we have a 1L and a 2L sort of similar program, and our 1Ls go to this conference each year, and they come back, and it's like, it is it's a highlight. It's a really meaningful step in their law school career. So I really think, I can't say enough about that program too.
Yeah, in the law school careers and for the associates, the associate fellows in the law firms and in the legal organizations, corporate legal departments, we talked about relationship building, building a network, building a community. Every attorney that I'm aware of who's gone through that program at one level or another, and students as well, felt like they had this instant community that they didn't have before, that was focused on making them be successful and making them comfortable. And as I said, we've been partnering with them since the beginning. But I'm trying this year to recreate a little bit of that at Reed Smith through affinity groups. So we've rolled out affinity groups this year, and I have to tell you, the feedback has just been phenomenal. The associates feel like, they have a say in what's going on, and they feel like they do have sort of that instant community. So our affinity groups are centered around Black and African American attorneys, Hispanic, Latino, LGBT, Asian. We have veterans group and a disability group. And that's what we've started with, at least for this. And I should say, we have a women's initiative that's been running strong for many, many years, and that's one huge affinity group. And we're actually looking to them for some guidance on how we structure our these other groups. But what we've done is we have a partner liaison and an associate liaison to the diversity committee in charge for each group. And, little things like having that associate liaison position gives them, beginning to think about leadership, and gets them in front of, the beautiful thing about our program is our executive committee said, we want to be involved. What can we do? What we can do? What can we do? And so, there's one member from our executive committee who serves as the sponsor for each affinity group. And works directly with that affinity group, including our global firm chairman, who is the sponsor for the African American affinity group. So it gives you an opportunity to get the diverse attorneys on the radar of the folks within the firm. It gives them the opportunity to do some leadership within the firm, and frankly, to kind of help structure and develop their own professional development in the firm, and it's been just phenomenal. And we just started this, in August, and already they've kind of put themselves together, and they're putting their mission together and what they want to do, and they've got a programming committee, and they've got, each group is sort of tailoring what they need for their group, and it's just been phenomenal.
I want to interject a question about the other player in law firm diversity efforts, who are our clients. So what have you seen in terms of client calls for a law firm to diversify the attorneys working on the matters? What seems to have worked, and why?
I think on the panel before, there was a really interesting moment when the general counsel from Salesforce was talking about deepening the conversation. And I think that's a part of it. I mean, I think we're all seeing upticks in clients being interested in diversity from staffing, from leadership, from all of that. But I also think that being a part of that conversation with us and saying, we want to be a part of it. Like I said, I'll give you an example. This week, when we do our in-house panel, when I went to Fox Entertainment Group and I said, do you have anybody who might be interested? Like within 2 minutes, I have somebody. Within a day, I got a call saying, could we have a second panelist? We have someone else who wants to be a part of this too, right? And so they're bringing 2 people who are giving up their Saturday to be a part of this. And I think that's a real part of, I think clients care about it, I think we care about it, and I think bringing that together really makes an impact.
Yes, having a combined approach.
Yeah.
Right. What about Caren?
And I filled out those surveys. So, I filled out hundreds and hundreds of those surveys from Pfizer and Walmart and all of those. And I will tell you, it wasn't until we started getting those surveys that I really started bringing practice group leaders into the conversation. And although it wasn't a deep conversation to start, it became deeper and deeper because, it's an iterative process, right? The first thing was, how many diverse people do you have? Which, not great, but okay, I'll take it as a starting point. But then it became like Microsoft, how many diverse people are on my matters? And I'll tell you that did something pretty amazing in the law firm. It got the practice group leaders involved. It changed our processes in terms of how we were looking at people and how work assignments were being doled out and who was working on what thing, and really paying attention to that. And we should have been doing that a lot anyways, but this was the driver in getting us to pay a lot more attention to it. So, as much as people hate those surveys, they are having an impact. And even if at this point there isn't a carrot or a stick, it's just a survey that goes out, it's still been helpful. So I don't care how small the client is. If we get something like that, everyone's in it to win it. And I don't know if it's the competitiveness of it or what, but when we get a survey like that, our lawyers want to be responsive. And they start thinking about it in a way they hadn't previously. So I'll take all the surveys you guys want to give us.
Right. Yes.
Got my question. It's a two-part question. And so I hear about all these activities and events and initiatives and programs. In the context of results, where we're talking about numbers, what results are you seeing from a recruitment and retention standpoint from all the activities that you are talking about? And two, how are you holding and who are you holding accountable for the desired results that you wish to see?
Mine's an easy answer because we track data. That's how we roll. And because it's a very public program, the practice group leaders and others in the firms are paying very deep attention to who they hire as fellows and what happens to them for that year, and also what happens after that year. There's been 27 news stories written about it, and the first question that gets asked is how many of these people have jobs? So people are paying attention to this. And so we have 31 new women in the field that couldn't get in previously. So we're tracking that data. And we're tracking it to see not only what happens when they come in, but what type of work assignments do they get? How are they treated? And what's going to happen if we don't have this answer a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now? But I'll tell you the really important thing, and this goes to your community, is these women are now a part of a cohort with each other. And so whatever happens, they have each other now, and they have shared experiences, and they've helped each other overcome some of the biggest obstacles that I could have ever imagined these women could overcome. So I don't know what they're going to do, but I'd be willing to bet you they're going to populate general counsels, they're going to populate financial services, they're going to populate the partnership, they're going to do great things.
Unfortunately, we're just about out of time, but does anyone else want to take a quick answer to that question?
Yeah, I mean, part of this is we're going to have a very rich data set because we're going to start with folks before they're in law school. We know their GPAs, we know their undergraduate performance, we know their demographic profiles, we know their everything. And we can see over time, because I think an important question to answer for all of us is what makes a lawyer successful? This is, part of what these organizations are looking at. And I think right now people say, oh, well, diversity can be kind of advantageous because clients care about it. It is a business opportunity. There's also the sort of moral imperative arguments we heard about. But I think we can also see that diversity of experience or diversity of backgrounds will also contribute to the lawyering skills thing. That's the hypothesis we're putting out there. And we're just going to have to see over time if we can get those results. I mean, our program is still fairly new.
I'll run the data for you.
Yeah.
Great. Do you want to have the last word, Deborah?
I was just going to say very quickly, we track data as well. I'm seeing such sophistication from our clients and what they're asking now that we've got to sharpen what we're looking at. And so, I think there's some tooling that needs to go on there with the data. But to your point about accountability, I think it's got to kind of be top down. So at least in the law firms, we have to work with the practice group leaders. We have to work with management. And frankly, when you have a role, like I do in the firm, I think, you wind up being part of that accountability chain too. So it can't just be one person. It can't just be all the diverse partners or attorneys in the firm, right? They're expected to bring the diversity in. That doesn't work. We know that. It's got to be across the board to the people who would be accountable for, any other success or failure at the firm. It's got to be, in my opinion, it's got to be looked at that level, and it's got to be a, collaborative, cooperative effort with a lot of people, taking accountability.
Well, and you see now that you didn't see previously on partner I love me memos. Do you know what those are? At the end of the year, the partner has to write a memo saying how great they are. for management. And now more than ever in the firms that I've seen, they're adding something that says, what have you done as it relates to diversity and inclusion? And then it's starting to get deeper. Who have you affected? Who's been promoted? Who's stayed? Tell me about your team and how diverse your team is and what you've done to make that happen, which that's a fantastic addition to what used to just be, how much money did you bring in? And that was the extent of that in 5 different ways.
Right. Hate to cut off the conversation, but things were really getting good. But I want to thank Bloomberg for creating this opportunity. I want to thank my amazing panelists, Anjan, Deborah, and Caren. Thank you all for your great questions and for your attendance. And I hope you all have a great rest of the day.